The Dragon Veteran. Clara Mortyn had seen it all in her 11 years at Ridgeside Medical Center. The 36-year-old nurse had a reputation for treating every patient with the same respect, addressing them as "sir" or "madam" regardless of their species or condition. But nothing could have prepared her for what walked through the emergency room doors that Wednesday afternoon. The massive emerald-scaled figure limped into the lobby, leaving small puddles of iridescent blood on the polished floor. He was enormous, a battle-scarred dragon whose holographic ID flickered with the name Walton Briggs. The military chip embedded in his left forearm glowed faintly, displaying his service record, Interspecies Defense Force, Dragon Division. His right flank bore a long, jagged wound. The scales around it had blackened with infection, and his wing membrane was torn in 3 places. The sight would have intimidated most, but Clara saw only a patient in pain. At the front desk, the charge nurse glanced at the wounded dragon and muttered, "No interspecies insurance clearance. Not in our system." Clara heard it from across the room. "That doesn't mean he doesn't need help," she said, already grabbing an oversized medkit specially designed for dragon physiology. The charge nurse frowned. "We can't admit him. The interspecies medical protocol requires pre-authorization for dragon treatment. We don't have the right forms filed." "Then I'll treat him off the system," Clara replied, her voice steady as she approached the massive creature. She led Walton to the widest corridor in the hospital, the only space large enough to accommodate his bulk. The dragon lowered himself painfully onto the floor, his scales scraping against the tiles with a sound like grinding stone. An act of compassion. Clara knelt beside Walton, her hands steady as she began cleaning his wounds with specialized antiseptic. The dragon's reptilian eyes reflected the harsh hospital lights as she worked, administering dragon-specific antibiotics and applying healing gel to the infected area. With careful precision, she sealed the tears in his wing membrane using medical adhesive. The process was delicate, one wrong move could permanently ground a dragon. From her own lunch bag, she pulled out a nutrient bar specially formulated for dragon metabolism and offered it to him. Walton winced as she worked, but remained perfectly still. "Madam," he rumbled, his voice like distant thunder, "I don't wish to be a burden. The Defense Force medical benefits have been complicated since the Nexus conflict." Clara gave him a small, steady smile. "You fought for this planet. Let someone fight for you now." His eyes were dry, but they held the weight of too much interplanetary combat and not enough mercy. The dragon had clearly seen battles that would haunt anyone, human or otherwise. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You didn't see me," Clara replied softly, patting his scaled shoulder. "But you're not walking out of here limping." As she finished the treatment, sealing the last of his wounds, Clara felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. This was why she became a nurse, not for the paperwork or the protocols, but for moments like this when healing mattered more than bureaucracy. Walton tested his wing carefully, the membrane now properly sealed. For the first time since entering the hospital, he stood without wincing. The infection was already responding to the antibiotics, and his wounds were clean and protected. The price of doing right. The next morning, Clara was called to administration. Director Hanlan sat behind his desk, his holographic display showing multiple regulation infractions highlighted in red. "You violated policy," he said coldly. "Unauthorized medication, unauthorized treatment of a Class 4 sentient species." Clara stood tall, meeting his gaze. "I helped a dragon who served in 3 interplanetary conflicts. You're suspended pending review. No hearing. No warning. Just a hallway that felt colder with every step as Clara walked to her locker. 11 years of service, gone in one meeting. She packed her belongings in silence, personal photos, a coffee mug her daughter had made in school, the small tokens that made the hospital feel like a second home. Outside, the twin suns were too bright. She held her purse and coat, no longer wearing the badge that had defined her for over a decade. No goodbyes from most of her colleagues, just awkward glances and whispered conversations that stopped when she passed. In her hover car, she whispered aloud, "I'd do it again." Walton's voice echoed in her memory, "Thank you, madam." She replayed it over and over as she flew home through familiar skyways that now felt distant and strange. At her kitchen table, she placed her interspecies nursing textbooks in a stack. All those lessons on xenobiology and proper protocol. None of them had ever taught her what to do when regulations came face to face with a 7-ton dragon who just needed help. By evening, whispers had started across the neural network. Some coworkers sent private thought messages. A few said they supported her. Most didn't say anything at all. The storm of support. Then someone posted online, "Nurse suspended for helping a veteran dragon. Welcome to 2075. Comments flooded the neural stream like a digital wildfire. Policy over people and dragons. This is why we lose the good ones. My father served alongside dragons in the Nexus conflict and was treated like trash when he came back. God bless that nurse. She's a hero. Period. If this is true, that hospital should be ashamed. My brother came home from Mars with PTSD and no help. Thank God for nurses like her. Fire the administrator instead. If he'd been a wealthy politician's pet dragon, they'd have given him a warm anti-grav bed and a private room. Ridgeside Medical stayed silent. No statement, no apology, no acknowledgement of the growing controversy. Clara sat on her porch, trying not to cry as her neural implant buzzed constantly with incoming messages, from coworkers, from veterans, from complete strangers who had heard her story. The support was overwhelming, but it couldn't bring back her job or the career she'd built. One message stood out from the rest, "He told me what you did. You don't know me, but I know him. I'm coming." No name, no contact information. Just that cryptic promise. Inside the hospital, Administrator Hanland held firm despite the mounting pressure. "We can't reward rule-breaking," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "It's about structure, not emotion. If we make exceptions, where does it end?" But outside the hospital walls, something was building, a groundswell of support that would soon become impossible to ignore. Justice arrives. The next morning, everything changed. At 7:14 a.m., the gravity lift hummed with an unusual weight. A man stepped into the hospital lobby, crisp military uniform pressed to perfection, for silver stars gleaming on his shoulder. Beside him walked a smaller dragon in full military regalia, medals catching the morning light. The security guard froze. "Can I help you, sir?" The general didn't even glance at him. "I'm looking for Nurse Clara Mortyn." Word spread like fusion fire. Neural feeds lit up instantly. Staff peeked from break rooms and corners, phones appeared, and whispered conversations buzzed through every corridor. Administrator Hanland rushed down from his office, his face pale. "General Morrison," Hanland stammered, recognizing the highest-ranking officer in the Interspecies Defense Force. "What brings you to? Where is she?" The general's voice cut through the administrator's pleasantries like a laser blade. Within minutes, Clara stood in the lobby, still in civilian clothes, her suspension badge conspicuously absent. The general stepped forward and, to everyone's shock, saluted her. "Nurse Mortyn," he said, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent lobby. "Staff Sergeant Briggs has told me what you did. You treated a veteran when no one else would. You risked your career to honor the oath you took to heal." He turned to address the crowd that had gathered. "This woman embodies the values we fight to protect across the galaxy. Compassion over bureaucracy. Courage over convenience. Service over self-interest." The general faced Hanland directly. "Your hospital will reinstate Nurse Mortyn immediately, with full back pay and a formal apology. Furthermore, you will revise your interspecies medical protocols to ensure that no veteran, regardless of species, is ever denied emergency care again." "But the regulations," Hanland began. "The regulations serve the people, not the other way around," the general replied firmly. And my recommendation carries significant weight with the medical licensing board that certifies this facility. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as her colleagues began to applaud. The sound started small but grew until the entire lobby erupted in cheers. Her badge was returned, her locker restored, and her faith in doing what's right validated by the highest levels of military command. Walton appeared in the lobby entrance, his wounds fully healed, standing proud in his dress military uniform. He approached Clara and bowed his great head in respect. "Thank you, madam," he said, his voice now strong and clear. "For seeing a patient instead of paperwork. For choosing healing over protocol. For reminding all of us what service truly means." Clara returned to her rounds that afternoon, but something had fundamentally changed. The hospital implemented new policies ensuring compassionate care for all species. Clara became the head of Interspecies medical training, teaching others that the greatest protocol of all is simple human, and inhuman, kindness. Years later, she would still remember that Wednesday afternoon when a wounded dragon taught her that sometimes the most important rules aren't written in any manual, they're written in the heart. The end.